Hello and welcome to the Student Art Podcast. I'm your host Baxter, and today is episode 3 of the new season. The podcast is a weekly series where I bring on guests in the film and game industries. If this is your first time here though, and you want to learn how to grow as an artist and learn what it takes to make it as a career, start now by subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. Today on the show we've got a very special guest for you. We have entrepreneur, film director, ArchViz artist and magazine editor Nigel Hunt. From working with high-end clients such as BBC, Channel 4 to HBO, you name it, the man's done it. But first things first, Nigel, I'll let you tell us a wee bit about yourself. I know I've given you a wee bit of introduction, but tell us a wee bit about yourself and we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much. It's fantastic to be on. Okay, so I am a New Zealander who I've lived in the UK since 1992. And I didn't intend to stay here. I was on, your typical Aussie, Kiwi, sort of traveling around the world. And my girlfriend, now my wife, we decided, we stopped in the UK. It was a beautiful summer. And essentially we ran out of money and I had to get my first job, which was with Sega. And that was back in 1992. And I had trained as an architect or an architectural designer. But 1992 was a massive recession, so there was no work. So I had to look elsewhere, and there was this new thing that was just rising up, the use of computers and computer graphics. And so I went back to college and started training, and therefore became one of the first people to start using what back then was 3D Studio DOS version.
Okay.
And this is right back, right at the very, very beginning of it all. And I look back on my life and I think, should have learnt Maya. And
I'm glad you said that. I'm a big Maya fan.
Yeah. But before that, Alias Wavefront. But because of my architectural background, I thought I needed to get a job back in architecture. And this would be my route back into it, but it didn't end up that way. There were new studios rising or blossoming in the UK at the time, and then remember the days before the internet. So you'd get weekly trade magazines that would come out, and I'd be looking through them to try and find a job. But then you'd start to see these wonderful glossy CGIs of buildings, and I just went, that's for me, that's what I want to do. And I threw myself into it, and this is 1993, 94, and started my own studio in 95 as the 5th studio to specialize in architectural visualization in the UK. Wow. And then now today there's 150, 200, and globally there are around there are more than 300,000 people work in the industry. So I've been in it from the beginning, seen lots and lots of things change. And it's been a really interesting journey of, it was not by design, but it was just, I look back on, what could I do now? And I know nothing else apart from computer graphics. And then along the way, I've got into software development. I've got into, diversifying a business. So we started doing broadcast visual effects and graphics and the whole journey. But I'm sure we can cover that over the next hour or so.
What an intro. Right, okay. Prepare yourself, folks. It's going to be a great podcast ahead. But I wanted to I know obviously you dived into your journey there, but I wanted to throw this question. It's one I ask every guest. When was it that you wanted to get into art as an industry? Was this always a thing? Was art always in your life?
When I was 4.
When you were 4, right? Okay, that's where it all started.
Academically, and I think that this applies to a lot of artists. There's a reason that we go into drawing. We go into, communicating our ideas through images. And when I was really, really young, that was what I did. And at school, I used to show off by doing pictures for girls in the classroom, and my teachers recognized that the art side of what I did was the direction they should push me in. So in detentions, and there are a lot of them, I would be made to go outside and sketch trees and do drawings. And I, you know, that one teacher would say, right, you have to now do 12 images or sketches, one using chalk, one using pencil, one using crayon. And I just thought it was the most frustrating thing in the world. But it led me to, you know, I wanted to be a cartoonist. And then it's just, so this is all I've really known is I'm in my mind, and I call myself, I mean, I'm an image maker. I make images for a living, and all my friends just don't understand.
Yeah.
That people are bankers, that they're like, oh, you know, they have no understanding of how I make money by making pictures for a living.
So how would you, because I know obviously you're a film director, you do art viz, you got your own magazine, etc. You cover lots of different avenues, but what is your favorite thing? Like, is there one thing in particular that's like that defines you, or do you just like having all these different avenues?
The avenues are a means to an end. And so, you know, my passion is telling stories through film, and whether that's using computer graphics or any other medium, it's a narrative that I've always loved doing. And then I suppose over the last 20 years, I got into working with a lot of documentary makers. So I then got into the whole history side of things, which became a real passion project of delving into, you know, ancient Rome or Tudor London, and then trying to actually interpret the brief or the script visually, so that, you know, we would go above and beyond our budget to actually really try and understand visually what it was like to live in these times.
Yeah. Well, I've got to ask you this then. So out of all these projects, so this is some of the numbers that was just astounding the first time I came across this. So you've worked on 2,500 projects across 40 countries, and that's probably not even all of it, to be honest. Like, you've done so many different things. Has there been a moment in your career that was like the best project or like your favorite project?
It depends. I think working on working on television projects that's probably the highlight of actually creating and designing cities.
Yeah.
But at the same time, working on, you know, a multi-million-dollar architectural branding film in the Middle East, where I spent months traveling around to the different locations and working with fantastic crews in Egypt. That was a highlight, you know, where we've got 100+ people on set who, I mean, they're building 4 hangar-sized stages for essentially a property project was unheard of. And then, you know, on that particular project, it was for the Kuwait royal family, and we finished off delivering the film to the royal family by going out there 2 days before Christmas and presenting it. Red carpets rolled out, and it was incredible. It was no expenses spared. But we were terrified, but at the same time so excited, and yet the royal family, the prince who we were dealing with, had such a crazy sense of humor that I mean, I could talk about that one for hours, but it was a highlight.
That's great. Wow. Yeah, because when I was doing my research and everything that I've learned through watching your content, it's the amount of traveling that you've done. Obviously, it all kicked off from, like you said, almost like like you weren't expecting to live in London from coming from New Zealand. I kind of wanted to ask you this because obviously there's a lot of people always thinking about moving abroad, trying new things. When it comes to making that step and actually taking that big hurdle to maybe leave your home, is there any advice you would give? Because obviously it is a big moment in their lives.
You know in your heart whether you're an international person, whether, you know, there are people and wonderful friends who went traveling and went back home because they wanted to be close to their family. They didn't want the if you like the continual risk of living away. But and I think if you're wanting to work in visual effects or games, you have to travel. You've got to go where the work is. And I suppose over the last 15 years, with all the tax breaks and governments really chasing and, you know, outbidding each other, then that work, you've got to become a migrant. You've got to start traveling, because if you don't, your friends that you started out at college or university with will all be like, hey, you know, there's a great job coming up at Weta. Do you want it? And that's how business works. It's all word of mouth. So for me personally, I don't feel I've traveled enough, and I travel, well, until this whole COVID thing, all the time. And that's how you build your imagination. And you've got to put yourself, not just travel by, you know, going to the south of France or going to, I don't know, Ibiza or whatever. But I mean, put yourself out there. Go to India. Go experience a different side of life and meet different people, because that's what life's about.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy you said that, because so I've moved a lot, but I've still moved a lot. Well, maybe, I don't know. It depends. Maybe in comparison to you, I've not moved that lot. So I've moved 14 times in my year so far, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do as a career. And it's always been part of the adventure. And like you said, you learn so much from it. It's you only live once, as cringy or stupid as it may sound. You've got to make the most of it. There's so much opportunity, like you said, and if it means having to maybe, well, the best way to put it, you're only going to find out the answer if you give it a try. Like maybe
it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think from your own discovery and feeling comfortable with just, if you're wanting to come up with ideas, if you're wanting to experience life, then absolutely travel. And you don't have to travel as a tribe of friends. You can go. There's nothing more self discovery wise than traveling by yourself.
Yep.
I can say that because my wife's out of the room. She'd probably kill me. But it really is. Like, if you wanted to get on in this industry, you've got to go to conferences, you've got to travel, and you've got to discover the world.
Yeah. So before we move on to the next subject, so when it comes to obviously taking that leap and say you have got, well, most things in place, is there anything, any more advice you would give in terms of, say you have realized that traveling is something that you want to do? Is there anything that can make that transition a lot more smoother and easier overall, or anything they should be prepared for? Like, what should they have? Is there anything that stands out to make that transition a lot more easier?
In what respect?
In terms
from a career point of view, or
in terms of living and career? Because obviously when you're, like, for example, when you transitioned from New Zealand to London, if you had to do that transition again, what would you change?
Well, I'm thinking of doing it again. I think these days the world has become way more homogenized in terms of, you don't need to travel with your, I mean, you've got these skills. If you're passionate about the industry that you're in, you can take those skills with you.
Of course.
It's also become a global village of people, and you know, get to know people around the world. Go and stay with them. Go and discover what they're up to. It's so, from a traveling point of view, travel where you can afford.
Yeah.
And don't. The one thing that really gets me these days is people seem to be in so much rush to get their stuff up on Instagram, to get their stuff up on Facebook. And it's like, why are you in such a rush to say that now I'm a senior or now I'm a studio owner? Or, it's like, I never thought that all these years later I'd be here talking to you about my career.
Yeah.
It doesn't, there's no plan for that. It just happens. And you know, here I am after all decades of working in this industry going, right, how would I do that different? I would just slow down and enjoy it. Enjoy the people that you're working with, because you're not going to work with them forever. And the ones that you know, you're gonna meet your future partner, you're gonna meet your lifelong friends, you're gonna have enemies, you're gonna have competition. It's all gonna happen as you sit there at work. And it's that you think that you're going into a workplace to just tap away at the keyboard, but as you sort of rise up through the ranks, you start to take on all this other responsibility that starts to weigh you down. So whilst you can, enjoy it, get out there, because the responsibility does come to you. And it's not just at work, at home. You know, a lot of the listeners are going to have kids, they're going to have families, and all of a sudden you're going to be sitting there one day going, you know, I'm 32, I'm 33. I wish I'd gone to Goa, or I wish I'd done this, but I can't now because I've got 2 kids.
Yeah. What? Whoa. That's one of the best answers ever on the podcast. So I want to touch on one of the main points you said there, which is crucial. Everyone's always trying to rush things, and obviously one of the obvious standing point or the main factors is social media. Everyone's obviously trying to create a brand in some way or shape or form, but they're not doing it organically. Maybe they're trying to force things too much. And I completely agree with you, because everyone's not slowing down at all. Like, they're not enjoying life. They're too busy focusing on trying to grow faster and faster, like you said. And people forget about the things that actually are more important in life, like that you touched on. Like, even just going out for a break, going for a walk, just taking yourself away from the screen can play such a big impact. And I don't know, it's just people care too much about numbers these days.
I think people care too much about their self-image, and less on how many people that you're on Instagram have you seen are actually just out of the blue complimenting their friends' work, not liking it, but just, and you don't have to do it publicly. So, you know, oh, I got 300 likes off that. How about you just message your friend and say, I really, really like that. I like what you're doing. You know, that there's so much narcissism in the world these days that it's, as a business owner and as an employer, we see through that. It's like, it's wonderful and great to see fantastic work, but it's all self-promotion. And if you've got everyone self-promoting themselves, then there's no one listening.
Yeah.
Because everyone's shouting, and if no one's listening, then why are you doing it? Change the subject. And all of a sudden, the people who do that are the ones that, this person's saying something different. I want to know all about him. It's my Instagram feed and Facebook is filled with thousands and thousands of just, it all becomes the same. You can't, what do they say? That you can't see the woods for the trees.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be noticed, do something different.
Yeah. Wow. Right. What a start of the podcast. We're just warming up, folks. We're just scraping the surface here. It's already kicking off with a bang. Right. So obviously, I know you touched on a wee bit about the business side of things. Obviously, you're an entrepreneur yourself. Tell us a wee bit about your company and your journey. So, like, when did Glow Frog begin, and what made you want to start it?
Okay, so right now there's 3 companies.
Mm-hmm.
So if we start with production.
Okay.
So Glow Frog was my production company for 20 years. I started that as a freelancer in London. just freelancing around different studios. And then, you know, I started picking up clients. I picked up clients by actually being in people's faces. It's like, this is, again, before the internet. So you'd make any excuse whatsoever to go in and see a client. And especially in a big office, it's all about you're there, you're present, and everyone wants to talk to the person in the room.
Yeah.
They don't want it's, if you're across the internet now, it's like, well, you're out of my mind. But if you're actually walking past, what tended to happen and how my company grew is I went in for one job and one job project request. And as I was walking out of that, another guy came up to me and said, "Oh, you Nigel from Glowfrog?" "Yes." And he said, "Oh, can I talk to you about another project?" And from day one, I've almost got this family tree of the hundreds or the thousands of projects that happened through word of mouth and from being in the room and just being out there. So my team, I think the most terrifying thing to happen to a creative, I'm not a business person. It just happened.
Yeah.
And is actually employing your first person, because it's like having a baby. You don't know what to do. I don't know how to employ somebody. And then all of a sudden I'm now responsible for them. I'm responsible for giving them money each week. And the weight of responsibility, that's the first weight of responsibility. They just keep piling up and up, and all of a sudden you're stepping further and further away from the tools, and you're managing and you're supervising. So it's very organic. The Glowfrog started in ArcViz and then moved quickly into broadcast VFX. Mm-hmm. When we were sort of transitioning, we also got into writing software, because like in games, the projects become more and more complicated, and you need the TDs and the R&D side of it to develop the tools to be able to deliver the project. So back in 1998, during the .com days, I started my first software company called Replica Nation. And that essentially was we were in direct competition with TurboSquid, and we were making models online. We had, the internet had only just been born. We had 20,000 3D artists who are all members, who are all using our 3D models. That company grew and essentially went bust during the .com big bubble burst, and we went bust literally on the signing of a signature for £20 million to keep us going for the next year or two. And the venture capital company had essentially just about to sign off on our money, and then they decided at a board level that they would pull out of technology stocks. So that company went bust. That's when I refocused on Glowfrog and grew that till 2016 into, it was a boutique sized studio, but we had about 20 odd people working across ArcViz, motion graphics and visual effects.
Well, since you said boutique, like when it comes to, I know obviously it's all about experience, etc., but what's your thoughts on, like, anyone who is trying to get into maybe starting their own business, etc.? What is like the biggest difference between small and big companies? Is there any main things that stand out to you, and like their similarities as well?
The big companies won't like me saying this, but they operate like a bank.
Okay.
And the fact that there's layers and layers of bureaucracy, the successful ones are run by business people who may or may not know anything about games or visual effects, but they know how to run a business. And you become a line item in a very large machine. Mm-hmm. why I use the bank analogy is if you go into into the city of London here, into one of the banks, you just got rows and rows and rows of computers, and you're sitting 100 meters down there somewhere doing something, and you as a boutique, you're all generalists, and you learn, you live and die on your feet. You've got to absorb everything and learn everything. And when you're young, you want to remain being a generalist so that you can actually just find what it is that you like doing. That, again, so back to sort of what we were talking before, why be in such a rush to try and get IMDb credits and saying, look, I've worked on 30 films, and you're 23. It's like, but you've done the same thing. You've just done roto work. You're not enjoying yourself. You're working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. You're not seeing your friends. That, again, slow down. There are so many incredible boutique studios these days and they're doing phenomenal work that personally, of course, there are people who want to work at the big studios, and that's fantastic, but it's not for me. I prefer to be a generalist.
Yeah, because when it comes to the whole small versus big companies, etc., obviously I found out what I enjoyed the most, so I prefer the smaller company. I think that suits me best, fits my personality, and the environment to me is more, I don't know, I like the family, well, not family, well, it's more family oriented, more friendships, smaller teams, easier to connect with people that way. And everyone who's listening, just try things out, figure out what's for you, what kind of environment you want to be in. And like Nigel is saying, your only way is by experimenting. Don't just have one. Yes, it's always good to have one main goal. Obviously, we're all trying to find our main dream and stuff, but experiment is such an important word in today's episode. I'm really glad you said that.
It does also depend on what industry you're working in.
Yep.
Because in visual effects, absolutely, there's a massive difference between the big studios and small in terms of their setup and their infrastructure of how they work, not in terms of the output. A lot of the big studios, or the top 4 in the UK, are all shareholder driven. They don't make their incomes essentially from working in features. They do advertising, they do all other stuff to actually support it. But if you actually look at the bottom line of how much money they're making compared to how much turnover they've got, it's phenomenal. And it's just, so in 1998, I got offered a job at Weta as one of the original 3D people. And that this is one of these life-changing moments for me where I've been in the UK for 6 years, and Weta back in New Zealand were looking for 3D artists. And so I applied, I essentially got the job, and then was cycling to work one day and cycled past this flat that this is who I am. I was cycling along, and it's in this lovely green leafy part of London. I went, I should just call in at the real estate place and just check out, see how much it is, and essentially put a deposit on the place and bought the flat and told my wife, who again killed me. Yeah. And I decided I wanted to stay. I wasn't ready to leave the UK and all the opportunity that it had, because at the time Weta was only 25 people. It was this fledgling. It hadn't won the Lord of the Rings contract yet. So I just thought, is that company going to grow? And I was thinking, well, the reason I left New Zealand, it was a tiny little country in the bottom of the Pacific. There's no way they're going to get any Hollywood films, or it's not going to grow as a business. How wrong was I, right?
but you think about it. It's all about like trial and error learning. It's like the most important topic, what we talked about before we even went live. It's all about failures. It's all about learning and experimenting all the time. I'm really glad you said it. It's so strange and so great having you on, because my whole life's dream was to work for Weta. So my goal is to move to New Zealand. My goal has always been to live in New Zealand, even if it wasn't to work for Weta, just to live there. I've always wanted to move there. So I now know who to go to if I want for some advice.
There is a follow-up to that, and that is was it last year before, in 2018, I went and spent the day there. And again, not with Weta Digital, because again, Weta Digital is a factory of just 600. It's grown to about 1,200 or more now. But it's a factory of artists. Whereas my interest was with Park Road Studios, which is Peter Jackson's post-production sound studio. But so I arrived for the interview in the afternoon, and it's like walking into a not just a 5-star hotel, but this is a building where Peter Jackson spent $300 million on it to impress Hollywood directors.
Wow.
Okay. And it's like walking into a Frank Lloyd Wright building. It's all Art Deco. It was incredible. So you walk in and you can basically smell the money, where the money's being spent. And of course, instantly I was very impressed, and spent the next few hours with the managing director and the head of production. And then they took me on a tour around the building, and we walking along, and like these full-sized theater recording studios. And I say, oh, what's in this? Oh, you can't go in there because James Cameron's in that one. And I was like, oh, okay. What about? I'll take you into Peter's recording studio. And so we go in there, and the acoustics is so well. Where Weta is built is in the flight path to Wellington Airport. So, and we're talking really, really close to it. So, outside you couldn't hear for planes flying over you. You walk into this studio, and the acoustics are so perfect that you can hear your voice change.
Whoa,
and of course, so you instantly burst into song, and the MD just laughs and said, everybody does that. I mean, that room alone. And I've been into lots of studios in Soho, all the big studios, and I'd never seen anything like this. So at the end of the day, they basically said, look, if you want a job, the job's here to join the management team. And again, I left buzzing like crazy. And I was buzzing 2 days later of like, that was the most incredible experience back to your point, what was the most incredible experience in your career? It was probably a day with the whole Weta group, and knowing that I was so proud that was from my country. And but when I came down and settled down, I went, I'm not quite ready to go back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'd love it coming from Edinburgh. It's very Scottish. But yeah, they're doing incredible work, and they're also now expanding into animation. They're expanding into real time, all sorts of things. So I was very privileged to see everything that they were doing back then, and still have a good connection with them.
Wow, gosh, that's incredible. What a story. Yeah, because like I've always been wanting to go, because my mum, she lives in Australia, and I've been dying to get down to that side of the world just to experiment and give it a try. Like you said at the start, traveling, experiencing a new culture. So speaking of one of the topics that you dived into, there's one question I wanted to ask, because obviously we were talking about education before we went live. Do you think there's too much focus towards bigger companies at education level? Do you think there's not enough discussion about the importance of smaller companies?
I think let's look at it from the educator's point of view, and that the biggest studios have a much greater requirement to get bums on seats. And so they've also got a greater reach when it comes to, they have all their HR teams. They're set up to support the schools.
Yeah.
And also from a draw card point of view for the schools, to say that, you've got Rockstar, you've got Framestore, all these people supporting you. Sounds much better than Joe Blogs and all these unheard of nobodies who are doing incredible work. That it's so they look at it from a business point of view.
There's always like, you'll ask anyone who's studying education, like, what's their dream job, and it will always be like the big names and stuff. And yes, maybe like they'll find out if that's for them, but then you have to kind of answer the question, is it your dream job, or is it your favorite game, or is it your favorite film? Like, what type of thing is it, the reason you're enjoying it, if you know what I mean?
That's a really good point, because it's, if you talk to an actor, and whether that's on stage or on film, or they never watch their own work. So why would you, if you're really, really passionate about Grand Theft Auto, it's like, to go and work at Rockstar is almost, I'm not going to say a kiss of death, but that's going to be your whole life, your day job. And a lot of the time, at the end of the day, you just want to get away from it. You don't want to come home and go, oh, I'd really love to play the games that are, the old games that I'm now working on, because to me, it's back to the original point of experiencing life. Go out and do something different. So be ready. You get fatigue, and you get fatigue depending on who you are, whether it's 1 year later or 5 years, 10 years. What was your passion? If it becomes a job, then it's going to become the thing that gets in the way of everything else. So don't be too precious about, oh, I need to follow my dream. It's, find a place that have got great people that you're working with. It's who you're surrounding yourselves with. You could be with, it was something I was conscious of with my company, because if I'm honest, we weren't doing incredibly glamorous work. Some of it was great. There are always tentpole films or projects that everyone got so excited about, but most of the time you're doing mundane work. So you can't be up the whole time. You're going to be doing mundane work. So find a place that you're comfortable with great people in a great location, and then you'll be happy. It's finding that happiness in your life, and that work-life balance. I know the work-life balance sounds cliche, but it's something that over the years, my parents, when we have the family calls, and they're always so worried. All you do is work. You work. You have no work-life balance. And I was like, don't tell me what to do. I've got 20 people to pay by the end of the month. You don't understand, but they do understand. And it's such a boring parent thing to say, but it's better to be happy than to enjoy something that you're passionate about through your whole life, and not kill it off by just going to, I was always passionate, and right back to when I was 9 or 10, with the whole Star Wars thing, but I've never had an interest to apply to go and work at ILM.
Right. This is an interesting topic, because so my childhood was always, so I'm Harry Potter obsessed. I love Harry Potter. I'm a diehard Harry Potter fan. So for years, it was always Framestore, Double Negative I had in mind. But that goes to your point there, because I was down in London at an event called Vertex, and Christian Mantz was there. So obviously being the main man at Framestore, and I had the chance to kind of pull just to talk to him in the corridor, and he just finished his speech about Fantastic Beasts 2. He did a presentation, and then during his presentation he was showing obviously everything about making the film and stuff, and it was that day that I realised, do I actually want to ruin my favourite film by actually working on it non-stop? Because I'm obsessed with the world of Harry Potter, and if I'm surrounded on a team, yes, it'd be great to go design creatures or whatever, or make these massive epic worlds, but then it was going to lose that passion, the build up to me waiting to see it in cinema. And that was like my childhood memories, that, like you were saying here, which is super important. And that's a topic I've never talked about in the podcast. Like, I've interviewed, this is like 103rd episode, and I've never talked about this, so this is great.
They say never meet your heroes. And I think the same probably applies with a studio or a director or a pop star or something, because you built them up in your imagination. You built up how Harry Potter's done. You know, maybe they're all in there at Frame Store with their wands and having a great time, but it's not the reality. It's just a job, and it's driven by budgets. It's driven by the fact that they have to deliver that shot within budget, and you may be, you know, you're going to be worked to death to actually deliver that in time. And it's just, you're just going to come away with a, you know, imagine if you don't get paid, if for overtime and all the stuff that's been going on in, say, in the content creation industry for many years of exploitation of their artists. Just watch it. You don't be in such a rush. Go for it if you can, but only if that's the sort of person you want to be.
Yeah.
It's because I find the successful people and young people who have actually really gone on to do great things have jumped around from, you know, they haven't stayed at a studio. They haven't stayed. They've done a year or two.
Yep.
And then they've jumped to the next project, and they've jumped to the next, and they'll go over to Vancouver, and then they'll be in Australia, and then they'll be back in the UK again. And it's the whole time they're also reaching out and teaching people and teaching people, you know, what their journey essentially, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's the best thing. Like, that's the reason why I do podcasts. It's like, it took me, like I said, 14 moves to figure out what I wanted to do as a career. Originally, it was obviously wanting to get into visual effects, and then after that, it was getting to AAA. And then once I gave that a go, I was like, right, no, this wasn't for me. And then I finally obviously I was doing my podcast, and then helping and teaching was clicking for me. It took me all those different trials and errors. I know, like, you obviously know from your experience, nothing happens overnight. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of experimenting, but
a lot of luck.
Yeah, and a lot of luck. It's a lot of things are down to timing, etc. Believe it or not. Like, yes. Well, actually, speaking of luck, what's your concept of, like, the whole idea of luck? Like, when you mean a lot of luck, what do you mean by that?
That you can work your ass off in a career and not get anywhere,
right?
Or you can go and network with someone, or you can be cheeky and reach out to someone, and it could change your life overnight. And it's having the balls to actually go, you know, I'm passionate about, I'm passionate about airplanes. So therefore, I'm going to contact the CEO of Boeing and go, hey, listen, I've got a great idea for a new plane. And it's like, if you're cheeky enough at the right time and the right place to actually just recognize this is my opportunity I'm going to jump on this, and you've got to do it.
Yeah. Because
that's literally how people get funded for their companies. They win a project. There is a lot of hard work that goes on in the background, but everyone works hard. So why is it that you think about in your class, say there's 30 people in your class or your year, now maybe only 2 people in your year are going to succeed. And be harsh about that, but succeed to where you thought that you would want to be.
Yeah.
And why is it that those 2 people made it, and it's just down to luck? It's down to the fact they were in the right place. They met the right person who recommended them to someone else. And that's the whole side of networking, that when I go and talk at schools and universities, that it's so important.
It's so crucial.
So it's you know, you don't have to be the best person in the room.
Yeah.
You just need to know how to play your cards.
Definitely. talking plays such a big part in it. Like, it's all about getting to know new people, reaching out to people, not being afraid.
Coming from architecture, going into the whole visualization side in the 90s, coming into the 2000s and wanting to break into broadcast TV and film, I had to think out of the box and think, this is like an iron wall down on Soho to only people with the right key to actually get in there can get to a director or get to a post house. So I thought, why don't I try something different? And that this is the day before digital had fully taken over, and people were still printing on 35mm film. So I went, well, I know that a lot of the edit houses, because directors spend most of their time in post-production in the edit suites. So I went, how about I invest in putting my showreel on a 9-foot piece of 35mm film as rushes, and actually knowing that if there's a director in this post house that, because you used to have runners running around Soho delivering rushes left, right, and center, and I'd put an urgent post-it note on it and say, for such and such director, here's the shot that's missing from your next film. And the person would deliver it into that post house, and that would go straight into the edit suite, and they'd go, what the hell's and they'd hold it up to the light, and they'd look through and they'd start to go through and go, and then it would just come up, it would have glow frog, and people would go, they'd ring me up and go, that Genius. Was hilarious. And that's how I got a break into broadcast.
Wow.
It's because everybody else is doing it the normal way. And you think today, as I said before, if everyone's using Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, do something different.
Yeah, it's because it's such a saturated industry. Like, one of the main topics I was talking on the previous podcast, and I'm trying to highlight the importance of this, is that too many people are like trying to absorb too much information at once. Like, for like on YouTube, like they're subscribing to so many different things, because it's like there's probably about, so when I started my podcast, right, so 3 years ago, there was only a handful of other people who were doing podcasts, or almost like kind of the same idea or maybe a wee bit different. So my take on it was approaching it from a student's perspective and like really honing in on the student side of things instead of the industry side of things. And then obviously later on, I started focusing more on the industry just to kind of get that 50-50 split. But now there's like 30, 40 podcasts. Another 20 have literally risen in the last, just because of COVID. There's literally about 20 new podcasts coming from each company. Literally every studio has started a podcast. It's
and so have we.
Yeah.
With our 3DS London meetup group.
Of course.
That we had to go online to try and keep our community together.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this is undermining, say, what your channel and your reach to your audience. And if this becomes the norm, we won't get into this too deeply, but if this becomes the norm, how do you change it up to stay relevant?
Yeah, it's always an important question. Like, you've got to constantly be evolving. I will admit, like, there was a time when so the first 30 episodes, it was becoming a bit stagnant. There was a bit questions were becoming a bit repetitive. So then I started introducing a new section, and then it completely turned everything on its flip side. And then I had more views again. It was more fresh. I was helping new people, and that's another main point that you've clearly highlighted today that we need to start doing more of, and it's experimenting once again. I know I've said it about 10 times, but it's such an important word. There's a few.
But you're also really focused on what people, your audience knows what they're getting when they subscribe.
Yeah,
it's focus, and you're not trying to do everything. And that, I think, goes with people's careers as well. It's what used to drive me crazy is when people just listed all the stuff they can do, and I was like, okay, but what do you do?
Yeah,
it's like, don't tell me that you can do everything, and it's like, all I want to know is, what are you good at?
Yeah,
because I don't have time as an interviewer to. I can't. There was one time I had a woman come in to me, and I said, look, tell me about yourself. An hour and a half later, she was still going. And I was literally going, kill me now. It's like, honestly, I did employ her because she was really lovely.
Yeah.
But just cut to the chase, because you've got to think we're now all living such crazy lives that whether you're a podcaster, whether you're an animator, whatever it is that you're doing, just remain just absolutely focused on what it is that you want that message to be out there in the world, and nothing else. Just cut everything else away, and then people know that's what I come to you for.
Yep. It's the easiest way to grow your brand. Have a specific target audience, and then keep expanding from there. Like, yeah, because if I today started doing a random podcast on my channel, like a completely different one, I don't know, we're talking about kite surfing today, I'm pretty sure everyone would be unsubscribed. Like, wait, what is Ross doing? This is unexpected. I did not expect this.
Ross's walking tour of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
I'd be like, people just turn away immediately.
Exactly. That's a super important point to cover. It takes time to find your niche, but it's all about experimenting, seeing what you can do to figure out the answer. So there's a few things I want to ask you when it comes to the business side of things. So when it comes to finding clients, what advice would you give when it comes to finding clients and actually increasing your business?
Well, there's two sides to that. One is, if you're doing psychology at uni as well, that's probably quite a good thing, because look at the client-artist relationship. What is it that you want from them? What is it that you want from a client? Are you just looking at a client as a paycheck, or are you looking? If you really are an artist, then that whole relationship should be symbiotic. What do they need from you, and what do you need from them? And there's a lot of clients who don't understand the relationship that they're commissioning you for. They look at you as, well, especially if you're a freelancer and not going to join a studio, for example. You have to work on your marketing. You've got to set the rules right at the very beginning of, like, this is how I work, what I expect from you as a client, and what I can bring to the table. So think of this like it's any form of negotiation. If you allow them to dictate the terms of and trust me, it doesn't matter what age you are, if you go in to a negotiation and actually just are firm in your beliefs of what you want to get out of it, it's going to be instantly, people are going to appreciate it, because it's like, right, okay, let's say you've got 10 grand, you wanting to make a short film or a commercial or something. And it's like, okay, well, no, I can't do it for that amount of money in the way that you're asking, a frame store, massive, big brand Guinness commercial quality. But this is what I can do for the money. And this is why, this is the breakdown of your expectations from me and vice versa. I always get frustrated when people, and it's happening more and more, people are just saying, oh, how do you get clients? Clients come to you for your integrity. But you have to be the salesperson and tell people what your integrity is to the project. They're not going to get that from a post on Instagram or on your Facebook page. They're going to get that from the fact that I've said, if we used LinkedIn, for example. Now, how many people on LinkedIn actually click on the message button and actually write to someone and say, hey, I love that project you worked on. Yeah. I'm a big fan of that game. I'm a student, and this is what I talk to students about. It's like, don't be scared of us. In fact, we love hearing from people. Write to me, but don't just click the connect button, because I'm going to delete you, because that's a bit like arriving or waking up in the middle of the night and someone's trying to climb into bed with me. It's like I don't know.
So true.
I didn't invite you in my bed, but if you give me a call first and you say, hey, listen, I'd really like to do business with you, that's great. Then I was like, well, okay, here's what you need to do first. So communicate and don't be shy. LinkedIn, I have got quite a lot of new connections through it. Case in point, last Saturday, I wrote to the head of development at NVIDIA after watching a SIGGRAPH presentation. I loved it. I loved what he was talking about. So what did I do? I went on LinkedIn, I looked him up, and I wrote to him. And I said, I really loved that presentation. Guess what? Within the hour, he writes back and say, hey, look, what can we do together?
Of course.
Bang, that's how it works.
Because like that was the same with like me and you, and because I came across your work because obviously the meetups, and when I came across, so I was watching Fabio's YouTube channel, and then he introduced your content, and that's how I came across your content. And
Gotcha.
I'm really glad you said that about the LinkedIn, because this is one of the things I tried to obviously highlight the importance of. So I did a pure podcast just purely about networking, and I said, yes, I understand people are a bit nervous, maybe doing that first message, maybe getting things started. Like, I understand that. However, sending a message, like you said, goes such a long way. Because I literally, a few months ago, went through my LinkedIn and cleared out a lot of connections. I completely wiped things out, because I think it should be, it's always about, like you said, a relationship. It's about a friendship. It's about understanding how to add value and how they could add value back, etc. And so many people forget that, and I think it purely goes back to your main point about social media, of like buttons, love buttons, etc., spamming things. People think they're going to gain value from that, but it's the message that you're trying to come across. Like, if you just connect with somebody and don't say anything, they're like you said, like, why are you connecting in the first place? There's no reason, there's no driving force behind it.
It's just, you're just acquiring contacts. You don't understand the power. I mean, LinkedIn isn't as valuable and big as it is just on the fact that a load of people are connecting. It's people like me and you who are actually using it for business. So, when I talk to students, and I basically, this may be going a little bit off piece, but one of the things when I talk about today in social media and the responsibility that you have. So say you're coming in for a job interview. So either myself or one of my team, we will do an audit of all your social media. We'll look at your personal Facebook pages. We'll go back 5 years. We'll see you lying in a pool of mud at Glastonbury. we will know all about you before you arrive. And why we do that is we wanting to actually evaluate who you are as a person. Yeah. And people don't hold it against you, but if you've got stuff on your social media that goes against everything that you believe in, then I will hold that against you, because you're not telling the truth. So when I've talked about that, I've been challenged by students to say, well, that's unfair, because who I was 5 years ago is not who I am now. And I went, you speaking up in class and talking about that is exactly why you'll do great. All the other ones who are there, people sitting there on their phones ignoring what we're talking about, going, that's the case in point. It's all there, and you're putting everything about yourself out there, and yet you're not reaching out to, like I say to students, why aren't you talking or connecting with people when you're in year one? Connect with seniors that in the companies that you actually really want to work with, that you may, in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, connect with them now and say, hey, look, I'm in year one. I'd love what you're doing. I love your company. If you could offer me any tips or advice, that would be fantastic. Because we remember that. And it's those people and I've helped countless people over the years who have reached out to me, and because of a project we've done, they're asking for advice. You're reaching out. Don't be scared, because around the world, you'll find if you approach in a mature and, an adult way, the question of not, I get so many, I want a job, and it's delete. We all want a job, but tell me who you are, for God's sake.
So you said this has been an absolute pleasure having you on. This is a great podcast. I'm loving this. Thank you so much for everything you said. It's been absolutely amazing. One of the things that you touched on, so in one of my interviews in the last few years, I got asked, or they told me, like that they were watching my podcast. They were like, "I've been listening to your podcast, so I now know a lot about you." Like I didn't expect them to say that to me in an interview. I was like, "Wait, you listen to my podcast?" Like out of nowhere, it just came out. I was like, "Right, great. I'm glad I've been saying good things. I'm glad I've been helping."
That's it. It's you've got that integrity to continue.
Yeah.
And I think people who have probably followed your podcast from the first to the 103rd and more,
Yeah.
are actually getting to know who you are and what you stand for.
Yeah, exactly. So, obviously we were talking about clients, etc. We'll be diving into that, but there was one thing that you touched on right at the start that I want to highlight, and it's managing your time when you've got so much things going, especially when you're running a business. So you've got multiple companies, you've been working on so many different projects, you do consulting, etc. What advice would you give to people when trying to manage so much?
Multitask. You can't do it when you're young.
Okay.
That sounds crazy, but you can't. If you're wanting to concentrate in growing a career or growing an expertise, focus on that, because your seniors and people further up the food chain are going to see that you are focusing on that. I've been doing this for 3 decades, that I now delegate everything. And so when it comes to the production work, I will sit in on, I've got, right now when I'm talking to you, I've got 4 screens in front of me.
Really?
I've got one that's got my Slack that I can see that the chat going on in production. So that's under control.
Yeah.
It's like working in a circus, spinning plates. So as long as all the plates are spinning and keep spinning, they don't need my help.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see a plate starting, it's going to topple and fall, I need to jump in and just to make sure, how do we get that back on track? So that's like running a project. Is you employ, and it's the golden rule, always employ people better than you.
Of course, yeah.
It's just, and it's said over and over again, and I think ego a lot of the time gets in the way, and it's like, but there's always someone better than you, and you find the people who are successful at identifying great teams of people and actually assembling them. They can't all be the same type of person either. You've got to have a producer. You've got to have someone who's got an analytical mind, who's really good with clients. You've got to have someone who's technically minded, and someone who's way out there who can actually come up with a crazy, no one thinks like that. Bring those people together as a team, and you've got a successful business.
It takes time to build a successful business. It doesn't happen overnight. One of the things though, so speaking of multitasking, I know you've kind of just answered it in a way. If people aren't great at multitasking, take me for example, I am not the best at managing a lot of things at once. I tend to like to focus on one particular thing and then obviously try and branch out if I can. To people who are wanting to go down that business route, is multitasking a must, or is there any advice you would give them? No. Okay, perfect.
No, but why multitask? We're all multitasking today, where we're looking at a phone, we're looking at a TV, we're looking at a laptop, we're constantly jumping our attention between one thing to another.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, that's all just entertainment or socializing or try to meet up with your mates or friends. It's in business, it's more about, are all the businesses in line with one another, and are they complementing one another? So my magazine is an ArcViz magazine that promotes and shines a light on people who use our software, which is the other company. So in a way, the magazine is a big infomercial for the software company. So it started off as an in-house magazine, and now has grown into an international one, supporting all these different companies. I do it because it's fun. I don't do it for any other reason apart from I really enjoy it. And the first issue had 28 studios and artists and people, and we support women in the industry and diversity. And so I thought this is a great channel or vehicle for me to actually continue what I do on the community activities, but now in print. And from a bizarre, and because print's dying. I mean, when was the last time you picked up a magazine?
That's a good point. It's the same with newspapers.
Yeah,
but only my dad and my grandparents buy it now.
There you go. So the question on the magazine side of it, why the hell would you be producing and printing a physical magazine when nobody reads it? It's integrity. There's something just wonderful, and I'm going to pick up one now, about receiving. You think at Christmas time, right? Think about Christmas and think about receiving a Christmas card from someone, whether it's your grandma or your friends or something. Imagine now taking away the Christmas card and around your Christmas tree or whatever, just having likes on your social media. It's not the same. You know, I say to people, the magazine is not mass produced. It's a luxury item that it's collectors. And if you're wanting to, you know, I curate it, I select the studios and artists to be in it, and it's a little gift to the industry. Mm-hmm. That's all. It's not a money-making thing at all.
Yeah, it's all about the value and like the just pure enjoyment, because it goes back to like the question of like, why do people start a business in the first place? Like the biggest common mistakes we always see. So I was listening to a consulting podcast yesterday while I was out walking, and the biggest thing is always about people are going into the wrong reason, just wanting to make money. The whole topic was all about sales and talking about the importance of sales. The biggest problem, the reason why sales is such a big problem or a bad kind of stigma behind it, is people always think when they hear the word sales now, they're just trying to sell me something that's not good. And at the end of the day, the only way to create a successful business is by adding value and actually caring about your client. And like, for example, the guy who I was listening to, he was saying every first consulting session he gives for free, just because he can actually get to know them, because it's kind of hard to get to know anyone in an hour. Take me talking to you for a podcast. I could talk to you for 10 hours for a podcast.
That is I'm going to jump back a few years now, but that is a really, really good point. So how did I get my first break or my first job? Mm-hmm. And straight out of uni or out of college, I worked for free.
Yeah,
it's like that. My father had sort of said, "Look, you know, offer them 3 months, or 2 months or 3 months of just work for free." I mean, and now people, it's not an internship, but I thought, well, may as well, and then prove that you have value to their company. Don't go in there. You're not worth. I mean, if you think back to the competition side of employment. Everybody is trying to bid for that one job. So imagine everyone in your class now becomes like a Simon Cowell, you know, competition. They're all bidding for that one job. Now, what advantage? What can you do to actually try and actually outbetter your classmates? If you offer it, if you can afford to do it for free, if you're living at home still, and you know you could cycle to work, or you can keep your overheads as low as possible. All of a sudden, if it's the right place and you're so passionate about it, not if you think your boss is a prick, because they're just going to exploit you, but if it's the right place, after a certain amount of time, you go, hey, listen, you know, how's it working out? I'd really love to stay on. And I've employed, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 people over the years who did exactly that as well. And I just thought, you're turning up each day. You know, it didn't have to be for the full day. It could be just a few hours, you know, whilst at university, just to get work experience. And God, I could talk forever about people doing work experience. But show that you give a damn about their company, and they're going to, you know, think of a company like a tribe. And it's, do you fit in with those people? So when you think about doing a job interview, analyze who it is that you're going to see. Analyze how you'll fit in. Will you fit in? You know, if everyone in the company are into lacrosse and you like football or rugby, you know that going to run out pretty quickly of conversation.
Yeah.
But just do your research.
I'm really glad you said that, because there was a time in one of my jobs in the past that no joke, everybody on that team, I was the complete opposite. I'm obviously the reason why I do a podcast. I like to talk to people and that, and I felt like I was surrounded by, like, there's nothing wrong with people being shy and stuff, but it was such a different environment that I wasn't used to, and that then changed the way I acted for one of the first times in my life. I was becoming incredibly quiet, and I was becoming incredibly shy, and I was like, what's going on here? This is not who I am. And I realized that was just not the environment for me. And that then ties to one of the points that I wanted to make is ask as many questions as you can in an interview, because that is your chance to figure everything out. Like, yes, obviously there's certain questions that can't be answered, but this is your chance to actually sometimes even put them on the spot. Like, you might be able to get like really important information that can really make or break if that's the right place for you, because you're going to be investing, like, you're going to have to move, maybe you have to relocate. That's a lot of money that you're putting money towards. There's so much money that you're going to waste if you don't take advantage of those questions or that question time that you have.
But that is an important one, because it goes back to really valuing your education. But then also, you've got to interview them as well. And not just the cliches of, oh, you tell me about, what are my working hours? Are there holidays? But interrogate them for their projects. Like we're doing right now, learn to become the interviewer. Learn to ask them about, okay, so that project you delivered last year, can you tell me what was successful? What, how do you think you could have done that better? And if you start to, because you have to be interested in their business, because you're going to invest your time in it. So do that research. Make sure you go in there with don't be cliche, but don't be afraid to not ask a difficult question of, why is it that your business, I hope you don't mind me asking, but this seems to be a new business for you. I'm sort of lining myself up here, but your business had failed. I saw your business failed like 3 years ago or whatever. What went wrong, or how did that happen? I think naturally, if you do it with respect, and if you ask questions out of that you're genuinely interested in, then I've really enjoyed those interviews more than others.
Yeah, it's always respect and honesty. Like, one of the things that I learned very early on was learning to accept what I'm not good at. Like, and just being straight to the point with it, because there was a point when I was just like, oh yeah, I'm great, even though I was useless. Like, I was like the worst, and that's the worst situation to ever put yourself in when it comes to getting into the industry, because they figure things out. People will begin to learn, and it's not a good situation to put yourself in.
I think also that the most people I've known get jobs through word of mouth. And so it's going to be back to, I suppose, what we were talking about earlier. Don't just get to know people through LinkedIn, but get to know people in your university and in a year or two, in front of you, and people behind you, because it's such a small industry, and not just in the UK, but globally. You will find that you're going to use those contacts. Like, so at Glowfrog, we employed, I would say almost every year we employed people from Hertfordshire University, because our team, that's where they came from, and some from Bournemouth. And the first thing, say we're crewing up for a new job, we would just look around and say, do you know anyone? And you know what they'd do, the team? They would call the tutors and say, hey, is there anyone great who is about to graduate, or is available in September or in October? And that connection back to your university will remain for the foreseeable future. And you'll use that, because for us, we were getting the best graduates coming out, and they were coming out and they would smash it. When I mentioned before about people that I still remain in contact with, who are now right at the top of their field. They were all students graduates when I employed them, but they showed such incredible professionalism right from the start that, it doesn't surprise me that they're now, head of MPC and all these things. It's just have integrity from the start and act at university or at college like you would in the profession.
Yeah, because that goes back to a really important point. Respect your teachers. Respect your lecturers. It can make or break like you said right there. Like, you're going into education and you're surrounded by all these teachers. Yes, okay, we come across teachers who are maybe not supportive and maybe they're a bit far behind the industry and stuff, but they're trying. And there's so many great teachers out there. People are really trying to help you. I think a lot of teachers...
honestly, they are. They really are. That's what they're there for.
Yeah, because teachers get so I was talking to a lecturer, I'm not going to say his name, but he's somebody I have a lot of respect for, and a lot of teachers and even himself gets a lot of stigma, but these teachers can't reply back. They can't respond. They can't protect themselves because it's against obviously the way things are. They can't just go out on social media or anything and say, no, this isn't right. This is not the truth. This is not factual. All these teachers are putting so much work. That's the reason why I do my podcast in the first place. And because I wanted to get ahead of a lot of podcasts in the sense of knowing the fact that I would be fair, 50-50 split, because I respected the teachers and I respect the fact that, yes, there's a lot of information that is behind in education, which I acknowledged that, but I have to take both sides. And it goes back to this point. It's be as nice as you can to everyone, and because you never know what opportunity it could pop up. Like you said, all my job offers, believe it or not, came from people I knew. You're not wrong. It's so true.
And that has essentially been, it's seen me through close to 30 years.
Yeah.
And literally everybody I know is the same. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's a great way to live in life, of actually respect the people around you, because it's like gardening. All the weeds, they do get weeded out of companies. I know that you're not supposed to, but companies share information. Yeah. So if there's a really bad person working at your company, other companies are going to find out, and then they're just going to be weeded out in the end.
Of course. Word of mouth.
All word of mouth. And it's just, you just think of those social circles at university or college, and it just doesn't change in the real world.
Yeah, it's never changed. So speaking of the real world, COVID. So COVID's obviously going on. There's a lot of things happening. When it comes to, once again, the business side of things, is there any advice you would give? Is it too risky to start a business right now?
It's risky to start a business at any time. You think back to my story for the last hour and a half or so. When I came to the UK in 1992, it was a massive recession. And so I would, it's this, "G'day, mate, I'm a Kiwi." And I'd ring people up, go, "Oh, yeah, my name's Nigel, I'm from New Zealand, give me a job." And they'd just scream with laughter and go, there was 2,000 people applied for that job who are way more qualified than you.
Yeah.
And that was my rude awakening of maybe I should go back to uni and actually learn how to use the computer.
Mm-hmm.
So we also talked about, don't be in a rush. Don't be in a rush to start a company, but this is your time to actually think, what is it that you want to do for 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years? We're at this, I'm going to call it a precipice of the industry's changing. It's going real time. It's going virtual production. Everything that I've known for all my career is turning on its head. This is your listeners' opportunity to go, why accept how things are being done for the last 20, 30 years? Why not change it? At the beginning of COVID, because I talk to a lot of people now online as well, like yourself.
Yeah.
And especially in the industry, just to, we chat, we make sure people are doing okay. And a lot of people had been put on furlough, so worried about, I really need to get back into the studio. I'm getting so, anxious being at home. And that's just stop. Look at this opportunity that you've now got. The world has gone and proven that you don't need to be in a studio. We've proven that virtual could be the future. This could be the future. That means that if you like the joke from many years ago of like, oh, you know, starting a studio from your bedroom is a reality. You could create your own feature film using Unreal and Blender with your mates and your wider connection around the world, all using Zoom. There's nothing stopping you. It's your imagination and really the fear of failure is the only thing in your way.
Yeah.
It's age doesn't matter anymore. It's Netflix. Netflix doesn't care how old you are. They care about what, in that particular case, or they would just get a producer in to make sure, like a school teacher, to make sure that you're doing things correctly. Everyone's chasing content. Everyone wants a great idea. And where that comes from, it doesn't matter. So I think COVID has presented talented artists with an opportunity that we will never, ever see again. So if the big studios can all have their artists working at home, back to that whole traveling point from a while back, you can now live anywhere. As long as you've got a great internet connection and you have integrity to actually deliver on the work that you're working on. You know, you asked me before about, you know, if I was thinking of traveling. I'm looking to, you know, I've been looking across the Pacific at Pacific islands like Tahiti to go, oh, I could go and start up surfing again and go live on Tahiti and do this every day.
Yeah.
And maybe work at nighttime, you know, in the European time zone. So don't think that for 1 second that you need to get into a studio. You need to connect with people and you need to have these sorts of conversations to go with respect. You know, I love what you've been doing, and don't go for the jugular straight away. Don't go for the bosses. Go for someone who works in the company and become their, you know, make friends with them. And then they're going to, you know, it's like dating. Meet the girlfriend of your future wife first, and she's going to introduce you. Don't go straight for the, you know, the person you want. Meet the people in their inner circle, and you're going to get introduced if necessary. It all can be done on Zoom.
Wow.
Or Meetup, or any form of visual communication. I mean, now we're communicating, and I'm aware we've gone over your time.
It's okay. I'm always. I could talk for forever. It depends on how much time you have. I just want to respect your time. That's all I care about.
But that's it. It comes down to. I'm really excited to see what happens. That leads on to, I suppose, talking about total chaos. So not total chaos. That was why
24 hours of chaos.
24 hours of chaos happened because total chaos didn't happen.
So yeah, right. Let's talk about 24 hours of chaos and everything that you've been doing. So obviously we dived into the world of business so far. We've talked about education. We've talked about a lot of different topics. As always, if you guys have tuned in late, it'll all be in the description below with the timestamps, etc. But tell us a wee about 24 hours of chaos and what was the reason behind it.
Well, I think before that, let's just talk about 2020 because. At the beginning of the year, or for the last few years, have been helping out. Or are we going to talk about the rookies a little later?
What do you mean?
Right, because the rookies came first this year, and me being one of the lead judges.
Yep.
I've been a big supporter of the rookies,
of course,
for quite a few years, but there was one sector missing, which was the architectural visualization side. So my role working with Allwyn has been to introduce the rookies and students to this other industry that this year we had hundreds and hundreds of students enter. It was a fantastic competition. But for me, I was completely blown away by the standard. It was, okay, there are a lot of people who didn't put the effort in, but when you're judging 3,500 entries and the quality, you know, I would write to the rookies and say, I don't believe this is a student. There's no way this is students' work. That went across all the categories, the animation, the visual effects, that, you know, and we have a whole sort of debriefing, the session afterwards, and we're gobsmacked by the quality of what students are doing. So that sort of leads on to the 24 Hours of Chaos. And because we thought, at the beginning of the year, Chaos Group had started to sponsor our meetup group. And of course, that was going to be a big physical party in London with 300 or 400 people and all the razzmatazz that goes with it. And then, of course, in March, the whole COVID shutdown happened. And of course, Chaos Group had sponsored us, had given us money. And of course, we had to scramble and come up with what can we do instead? How can we still do something global or something for our community? And then I'd had this mental crazy idea after also working with the rookies and seeing the student work and seeing work from all around the world, thinking, wouldn't it be great to pass the mic from what is our London show and pass it to New York, and then New York pass it to LA, and it just
around the globe it went.
Around the world it should go. And then we started looking at the world clock and realizing, hang on a sec, we can't leave South America out of this. And then we can't, when we get to the Americas, there's a lot of countries to cover. So we split it into what became Brazil, then New York, then Montreal, then LA and Vancouver. But essentially it started off as a small idea, as a crazy, look, this could be quite fun to do in June. And then it snowballed into, Chaos got really behind it, which was phenomenal. It got into a bigger idea. We had secured hosts, including the rookies in Australia, to host their local shows. And, the rookies, their show was focused on education, but we went to Bali. There was a lot of inspiration talk there, and India. It was phenomenal how people got behind it. And we ended up having over 100 people working on it, and all volunteered. There were some grumbles of, we should be paid for this. This is a company thing. And we would remind people, this is a community thing that Chaos, the brand had got behind and actually put their weight behind it because they really valued the community that we work in. Took place over 24 hours, just under 2 weeks ago. And yes, I have recovered.
Back to normal sleeping.
Yeah,
Almost.
But it did take 5 months to organize, of volunteered work, and again, multitasking. There's no way it could have been done with a small team. It was a collaboration between a lot of very talented and very passionate people. So we're completely excited, completely amped by it. We're now, there was so many more things we wanted to do, like competitions, and so next year we're going to try and do something even bigger.
Awesome.
I'm very passionate about the student community. I'm very passionate about, especially working with the rookies and seeing the talent and the raw talent, that how do we bring the student community into, if you like, the business side. And you'd be really surprised, say with 24 Hours of Chaos, how many conversations over 5 months we had of who do we talk to? Where do we find, students to come on and actually represent their university or their new idea or their game. So that will happen next year.
Yeah. So like everyone who's tuning in and listening on YouTube, all these links will be in the description below, so you can go check it out and listen to the craziness, the awesomeness that they put together. So just first of all, thank you for putting that together. Like, there's so many great guest talkers and there's so many different things to learn. And it goes back to one of the main points you said when we were talking about the COVID situation. Yes, I understand that it's a difficult situation at the moment. There's a lot of things people are going, but we're all going through this together. And Nigel took advantage of, he made the most of it. He figured something out to provide to the student education, to really help get more information out there. It's all about trying things, experimenting, and making the most of it. Like you said, like this is like COVID to me. I know this is like obviously none of us want COVID, but I've grown so much because of it. Because obviously I've been put on the spot. I've had to learn things a lot quicker. I've had to adapt and adapt. Being able to adapt is such an important thing when it comes to the industry, because you're going to be thrown curveballs left, right, and center. You name it. It's such an important part of life. And tuning into this chaos, this live stream will provide you with non-stop content. So make sure to check out, and most importantly, tune in to everything that Nigel and his team has to come with the London meetups, etc. You name it, on their YouTube channel.
I think on the less positive side, it has really impacted a lot of people.
Yeah.
On one hand, there are a lot of studios that I know are still employing, and that they are employing new talent, but it makes it so much harder to not be able to go to a live event, to not be able to go to actually just to network. That to me is, I mean, this year was a response to being locked down, but it does not replace going to a games conference or visual effects or Vertex. That's where you make connections with people.
Yeah,
it's a bit like, and I don't know how many people at the beginning of lockdown all started joining quizzes online, Zoom quizzes. We're all doing it, and they just got tiring after a while. And we were really, really conscious of Zoom fatigue or online fatigue, but I don't know how long this will probably be with us for some time. So again, another thing that I'm working on right now is turning myself into a cartoon. So I'm about to disappear into 2D-ness, because why if you're creative, why show your face on screen? Why not with Adobe Character Puppet or Animator? Everyone listening, create your own character and join Zoom meetings with your friends and freak them out. So all tools are available to you, and it's just you think out of the box. Because
it was the same thing as well for Fabio. So what is it, G2? So D2. So obviously he last year, I believe he was running, etc. And then this year he had to completely change things up, and he did it online as well. It's the same with his content on YouTube. Another great person to check out. But it goes back to that point of when you're given a different scenario, you can either sit in your chair at home and do nothing about it, or you can take action. I know that's a bold statement for me to say, but it's all about trying to find the positives and trying to figure a way around it.
Now another person that I don't know if you've had on the show is Hrs Dalal.
Oh yeah, I talked to him at Cave Academy.
Yeah, so Hrs,
he used to work for you.
And well, we used to work together, but he's always inspired me for he will use anything and any kind of tool to get his films made.
Yeah,
and he's a sort of person who, nothing will hold him back from his desires and dreams. There was one film, and I don't know if it's still on his website, where he approached a smartphone maker and says, "Hey, look, I can make a film on your phone. If you sponsor me," and he got $5,000 for it, because, as I said before, everybody wants content. And they were like, "Okay, go for it. We've seen what you've done in the past. You don't have to have all the tools. We've all got a 4K camera on your phone. That phone is more powerful than ILM when they made Jurassic Park. So don't be afraid to use the tech that you've got. Download free apps but be creative. When you're sitting there at breakfast at the table, you can actually set up your phone and start doing stop motion with your eggs. You do just be different and find a visual voice for yourself, and use the internet and use all these tools that I would guarantee that every single one of your listeners knows more about than I do.
Yeah, there's so much things, like there's so much free resources these days that can literally get you anywhere. Like Google has it all, believe it or not. The only thing that you're missing is what we've talked a lot about today, which is the connection side. You nail both of them, you're sorted. You got your career. You don't have to invest into so many things.
No, and then last year at Vertex, I think it was Framestore. This guy did a talk on modeling the city, and I went along because it's cities and making cities are my thing.
That's what you were good at, yeah.
And so I sat in on it, and of course, Framestore, you think, oh, they're going to use Maya and Arnold, and he's going to bring out the big guns. He pulled out his iPad and he said, right, I'm going to use a free app on my iPad, and I'm going to make a city with it. And for the next hour and a half, he used this free technology, building 3D assets. And I was just like, this is genius, this presentation, because it goes against everything that every artist should stand for. And it's don't just go for the most common software or the trendy software that everybody's talking about. Just use something that you feel comfortable with. Use a
be yourself,
Microsoft Paint or whatever. Yeah. But if that's your thing, what used to happen with us in the studio was when directors came in, they'd always, because we were at V-Ray and 3ds Max, and we had Maya and we had Softimage, we had everything, but the predominant pipeline was a Max and V-Ray going back to the very early days. So when directors came in, they'd go, oh, do you keywords, do you use Maya? And of course, absolutely, we're using Maya and RenderMan, and we're using, just tell them what they need to hear, but deliver the product. Doesn't matter. It's honestly, if you make a film, a feature film on an iPhone, so you'd be shocked at how many VFX supervisors will do shots now using a phone on set, and it will get into the TV program or it will get into the film.
Yeah, because so when I was interviewing Hrs, it was such a blast talking to him. He was I don't know, I keep forgetting the name of the device, but it was almost like he was walking around his bedroom or his living room, and he literally controlled an insane Unreal environment on a laptop, and he had everything, like his whole team, there was like 4 of them or 5 of them working on this short film, and it's great seeing like the advancing of technology, and I can't wait to see like the future, like what the future holds for us. Like I know you're a big fan of VR, AI, etc. You name it. I can't wait to see. That'll be a great question to finish everything on.
No, well, here's a question for you, and not really a question. Here's an observation. So back at the beginning of the internet, the first browser that I started using, I loved, it's called Dogpile.
Dogpile? I've never heard of this.
Dogpile still exists. And then you think of all the other search engines that existed before Google was nothing, and then they suddenly took over. Now, what's to say that the 3D software or the software that all your listeners may use in the future may not have been invented yet? It may be one of them who is going to come up with the big idea. Don't just fall for what's being handed to you. Question it. Ask why. Does that work for me for this particular project? Now, has jumped into, we can talk about brands, can't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's jumped into Unreal, which is fantastic, and Unreal are doing a phenomenal job. But then so is Unity, and Unity's doing a phenomenal job, and there are dozens of other companies doing incredible things. So just because one software may be the leader right now, who's to say in 5 years' time they will be?
Yeah,
none of us know what the future holds. And some of us are privileged we've seen into what people are developing for AI, where AI could go. And I think that there's a lot in that. There's a lot in the fact that, to me, why I started developing software back in the late 90s and then have continued to do that in partnership with production work is because the vanilla out-of-the-box software doesn't quite meet my demands of what I want it to do. The same applies to today, to Unreal and to Unity, and you want to tailor it, and every game company will, creating their own tools, and all companies do. So learn a bit of coding as well to get by, because it's going to help you. But then look into the future. It's massive question mark of where we're going to go. And to me, I find it's not going to be terrifying. It's not going to take your job. When I've talked about this in the past, and I've brought up a slide of, I think it was 1908 or something, and here's this photograph of it. I think it's the street of London or New York, and here's all these horses and carts all up and down the street, and there's this one automobile going down the street, and one of the horses, is standing there, and it's turned its head looking at the car. And I always ask the audience, imagine what that horse is thinking. It's like that metal contraption could never take over. And look at us today. There's still horses. In fact, I was walking in the country yesterday, and we played some pick the horse or shout out the horse game or something that our friend made up. And there's always going to be horses. But as technology changes and adapts, think of the fact that there may not be a need for 200 people to work on a game. You could do that with maybe 2 or 3, and let the software do all the heavy lifting. It won't have an imagination. It won't be able to come up with a crazy idea to begin with. But that was always my dream of, and why I moved into creating and building cities. Don't think we had a big team. We had a very, very small team, but we could build the whole of New York, or we could build London, or we could build San Francisco. We would build these cities and then destroy them for the TV show. It was so much fun. That to me is the future of being able to embrace technology, use whatever tools you feel comfortable with, and then go and have a life somewhere else. Learn ballroom dancing, do whatever to get away from the computer, because it's a marathon. You're going to be in it. If you're passionate about it, you're going to be in it for the long run. You don't want to burn out in the first 5 years of working on this to try and prove yourself and prove your name. Get out there and network with people and share your story. That's one final thing. When I've talked to students at Solent University, that a lot of them are going, oh, how do I get a job in the industry? I don't have any experience. And I say, stop. Let's just rewind a bit and say, how long have you been using a 3D software? Oh, I started at 14. Okay, so you've now got, I think he was 20. You've got 6 years of experience. Use that to your advantage. Talk about it. You've got 6 years of experience, but you've decided you've gone to university to study. But I started using 3D when I was 1. Use that story. Come up with a story. Get confident in yourself. Take acting classes if you need to build your confidence. But I think be ready to sit around and have a beer with someone. Have a laugh, because that's what we're all on this planet for.
Nigel,
Done.
What a legendary podcast this has been, folks. Oh my word. I did not expect... I knew it was going to be an epic one, but gee whiz, everyone who's tuning in, most importantly, every link's in the description. Go check out, so what he was talking about there, so his company's Urban, insane. Check out the video, you don't want to miss it. The intro, the main page, really awesome company. Cine software, you name it, all these links will be down in the description below. As always, if you guys are new to the podcast, smash the subscribe button. It really does help the channel grow. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed today's episode, and let's see down in the description what was the best point that you learned today. Is there any new things that you learned? Because I learned a ton from Nigel. So Nigel, thank you once again. It really does mean a lot. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute epic conversation, and with that said, folks, we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.